I didn't think anything unusual would happen that afternoon. I just needed the notes, nothing more dramatic than that. My sister's handwriting is a universe I can't decipher even on a good day, and the midterm was creeping closer. So I walked the 2 blocks to her friend's house, rehearsing a simple line in my head. I came to pick up the notebook. Straightforward, neutral, boring. But the moment the door opened, nothing about the moment stayed boring. It wasn't my sister standing there. It was her. I'd seen her a few times. In that vague peripheral way you notice someone older, but effortlessly composed. Usually she was stepping out of her car or locking up the little repair shop across the street from campus. Her movements calm in a way mine never were. She had that kind of presence, like someone who never needed to rush to be taken seriously. "Ah," she said, leaning against the doorway like she already knew the entire script. "You're the brother." Her voice wasn't loud, but it settled into the space between us more confidently than I expected. Mid-40s, maybe older, hair tied in a loose knot like she'd been working all morning. A small smudge of grease sat near her wrist. She must have been fixing something again. I opened my mouth to confirm who I was, but she added softly, almost like she'd been thinking it long before I arrived. "I've been waiting for you." Not in a flirtatious way, not even in a way that made sense. Just a fact she placed on the table between us. I froze. My brain took the words apart, tried to rearrange them into something normal. It failed. Before I could figure out what to say, she stepped aside. "Your sister left the notes inside. Come in." "Shoes off, please, floor's cold." She turned without checking if I followed. I did. Her house was quieter than I expected. Not empty, just the kind of quiet that comes from someone who prefers thinking before speaking. The faint smell of solder and lavender hung in the air. On one corner table lay half-open devices, a tiny screwdriver, and a cup of coffee that had definitely gone cold. She noticed me glancing at it. "I forgot it was there," she said, almost amused with herself. "I do that." She walked toward a small shelf near the couch, pulling out a notebook stacked between 2 manuals. She flipped through it, pausing on a page like she wasn't sure she wanted to give it up yet. "You're in engineering, right?" she asked. "Trying to be," I answered. My voice came out lighter than I intended. She closed the notebook and held it out to me. "You look more like someone who ends up fixing things rather than taking notes on them." I didn't know what that meant, but the way she watched me, steady, studying without being rude, made it feel like something I wanted to believe. When I reached for the notebook, our hands brushed. Just a light touch. Barely anything. But she didn't pull away immediately. Neither did I. A second too long. Maybe 2. Enough for something unspoken to slip into the room. I cleared my throat first. "So thank you for holding on to this." "You walked all the way here," she replied. "Least I could do." She walked me back to the door, but right as I stepped out, she paused behind me. "Next time," she said, and there was a flicker in her tone. Something warmer, something I wasn't prepared for. "Don't wait until you're drowning in deadlines. Just come earlier." I managed. She smiled, small but unmistakable. "Good." The door clicked shut, quiet but final. I stood on her front step longer than anyone should after picking up a notebook, trying to understand why a single sentence, spoken by a woman I barely knew, kept echoing in my head. She'd been waiting for me, and for some reason I still can't explain, it didn't feel like she meant the notes at all. I didn't expect to see her again so soon, but 2 days later, my phone buzzed with a message from my sister. "Can you drop off the spare cable to her shop? She needs it ASAP." Of course she did. I stood outside the repair shop for a full minute before going in, pretending to check the cable in my hand, pretending I wasn't thinking about the way she'd said you look like someone who fixes things. The bell above the door chimed softly when I entered. She was behind the counter, sleeves rolled up, hair pinned haphazardly with a screwdriver, like she didn't have an extra hand to spare. A small radio played something old and soft in the background, barely covering the hum of machines. She didn't look up at first. "Be right with you. Just need to wait. Hold on." She glanced up mid-sentence and stopped. "Oh." A pause, faint but noticeable. "You." I lifted the cable a little, trying not to look like I'd rehearsed the gesture. "Delivery." She exhaled a laugh. Not at me exactly. More like at herself. like she hadn't expected to react at all. "Come around," she said, gesturing me behind the counter. "I can't get this thing open, and I'm about to throw it out the window." I did as she asked. The workbench was littered with tiny screws, metal casings, and a half-finished cup of tea that had clearly been forgotten for hours. I handed her the cable. She took it with the sort of careful precision she used for everything. But when she plugged it into the device, her hands trembled, barely, but enough for me to notice. She muttered something under her breath. I haven't slept properly in any way. It doesn't matter. But it did matter. I could see it in the way her shoulders slumped for a second, the way she blinked too slowly, like the world was heavier than it should be. "You okay?" I asked quietly. She didn't answer immediately. She just stared at the open device, her thumb tracing the edge like she was stalling for time. "I forget things sometimes," she said finally. "People think I'm put together, but—" She cut herself off, shaking her head sharply. "Ignore me. Bad habit. I talk too much when I'm tired." She didn't talk too much. She barely said anything at all. I leaned on the bench beside her, giving her space without stepping away. "You want help?" Her eyes flicked to mine. Not surprised, more thrown off. "I don't need help," she said, almost defensive. Then, softer, with a strange twist in her voice, "But I wouldn't mind it." So I held the casing while she reconnected a wire, our fingers brushing more than necessary. Her laugh slipped out when one screw rolled off the table and she failed to catch it. "That's 3 today," she muttered. "I won't tell anyone." She shot me a look, tired, amused, something else layered underneath. Then she reached for the casing, and her hand grazed mine again. This time she didn't pull back immediately, just long enough for the moment to register in both of us. When the device finally powered on, she let out a quiet breath, almost a sigh. "Thank you," she said. Then, barely audible, "You make the room feel less loud." I didn't know what to say to that, but she looked at me, really looked, and for a second the air between us tightened. Not uncomfortable, just aware. Before I left, she touched my wrist lightly, like she wasn't sure she was allowed. "Come by if you're free," she said. "Not for work. Just come." The touch was brief. The invitation was softer still, but the energy under it, I felt that long after I walked out the door. It was raining the night I ended up back at her shop. Not the dramatic movie kind, just a slow, steady drizzle that made everything feel heavier. I'd stopped by to return a tool I accidentally carried home last time, but the moment I walked in, I knew I wasn't interrupting work. She was sitting on the floor behind the counter, back against the wall, knees drawn up slightly. A single lamp lit the room, throwing long shadows across the scattered parts around her. The shop was closed, the sign flipped hours ago, yet she hadn't gone home. She looked up at me with an expression that wasn't surprise or annoyance, more like she'd been waiting for someone and didn't expect it to be me. "You're drenched," she murmured. I shrugged. "Didn't bring an umbrella." A faint smile tugged at her lips. "You're too young to be this unprepared." I sat down beside her, not close enough to be inappropriate, but not far enough to pretend I didn't want to be there. She let out a sigh that seemed to trail into the small, dim room. "It's been a day." I didn't push. She didn't offer details. We stayed in that quiet, listening to the rain tap against the windows. Then her phone buzzed on the counter. She didn't move to get it. I watched the screen light up twice, same name both times. A man's name. She stared at the glow with a tightness in her jaw I hadn't seen before. "You can answer," I said softly. "I don't want to," she replied, even softer. Another long pause, her fingers rubbing at her thumb, a small, anxious habit she'd never shown around me. She finally spoke. "People think age makes things easier. It doesn't. You just get better at pretending you're not confused." The honesty hit harder than I expected. She didn't look at me when she said it, and maybe that made it feel even closer somehow. "What's confusing you?" I asked. She laughed, brief, hollow, nothing like the laugh she gave when screws rolled off tables. "That's exactly the problem. I can't say it out loud." Her voice caught near the end, like she'd barely stopped herself. The rain softened outside, the silence thickening between us. I watched her hand as it relaxed against her knee. For a moment, she looked tired, yes, but also softer, more open than she ever let herself be. She finally turned her head and looked at me. Really looked. The kind of gaze that makes your chest tighten because it feels like she's searching for something she shouldn't be searching for in you. You shouldn't stay late, she whispered. You didn't ask me to, I replied. I stayed because I wanted to. Her breath hitched, quiet, but unmistakable. She reached out, almost on instinct, brushing a loose thread from my sleeve. The touch was nothing, technically, barely contact, but it froze both of us. Her fingers hovered there a second too long. Then, a sharp knock on the shop's back door. She flinched. Her hand dropped immediately. Another knock. Louder this time. She stood quickly, wiping her palms on her jeans, mask sliding back into place so fast it startled me. I need to get that, she said. But before she moved away completely, she hesitated, just one heartbeat, like she was about to say something else. Something truer. She didn't. Instead, she whispered, without looking back, "Don't go yet." And then she disappeared into the back, leaving me with the echo of a moment that almost became something else. I didn't hear what happened at the back door, just muffled voices, low and tense. By the time she returned, the rain had stopped and the lamp seemed dimmer, like the whole room had exhaled without either of us. She stood a few feet away, arms crossed, not defensive, just holding herself together. Her eyes avoided mine at first. Then they didn't. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "For what?" A small, humorless laugh. "Everything. Nothing. I don't know." She walked to the counter, but didn't sit. She kept her distance like she was afraid the air between us might collapse if she got too close. The silence stretched thin. "You don't have to explain," I said. "That's the problem, isn't it?" she replied. "I never do. I hide until things turn into something I can't manage." She rubbed the side of her neck. A familiar gesture now, her way of grounding herself. "You didn't do anything wrong," I said. "Yes, I did," she whispered. "I keep letting this happen." I almost stepped forward, but something in her posture held me back. Not rejection, more like she wasn't ready to be near anyone, even me. She finally sat, elbows on her knees, head bowed. "Tell me the truth," she murmured. "Do you ever stop and think, why am I here?" "Because I do. Every time you walk in." She looked up, eyes searching mine. And I never know what to do with that. My heart jolted in a way I didn't want her to see. "I come because you don't push me away," I said. "Not really." "Does it look like I know how to do that?" she asked, voice threadbare. "I can fix broken circuits, cracked screens, cars that shouldn't even run. But ask me to handle a person and She stopped herself, swallowing hard. "I'm not good at this." I took a cautious step closer. "At what?" She lifted her eyes to mine. "Direct. Too direct. At wanting someone around. At letting it matter." The room felt suddenly smaller. Not warmer, just narrowed, like everything unnecessary had fallen away. "I'm not trying to make anything complicated," I said. "I just like being here." "That's exactly what makes it complicated." Her voice trembled at the end, barely noticeable unless you were listening for it. And I was always listening when it came to her. I moved to sit on the floor across from her, leaving a respectful gap, close enough to see how tired her eyes were, close enough to hear her breathing shift. She looked at me for a long time. Too long. "What are we doing?" she whispered. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't dramatic. It was the most honest question she'd ever asked me. "I don't know," I admitted. Her gaze dropped to my hands, then drifted back up, slow, hesitant, like she was afraid of what she'd find in my face. "I keep telling myself you'll get bored," she said. "That you'll walk out, and I'll be relieved." She paused. Then, so quietly I almost missed it. "But you don't leave. And it scares me more than anything else." Her words hit the center of me, sharp, fragile, devastating. She exhaled shakily, eyes glistening in the low light, and added a final line that stayed with me long after the night ended. "I don't know how to be someone you stay for." The next day, she texted me for the first time. Not a greeting, not a question, just, "If you're passing by, I could use another pair of hands." I wasn't passing by, but I went anyway. When I entered the shop, it was quieter than usual. No radio, no tools scattered, no half-open devices. She stood behind the counter with a box in her hands, not working on it, just holding it, like she couldn't decide what to do with it. You all right? I asked. She hesitated. Then she gestured toward the back room. Come here. Her tone wasn't distant, but it wasn't familiar either. It was something in between, like she was walking barefoot on a floor she wasn't sure would hold. Inside the back room, everything was cleaned up. Too clean. A single envelope sat on the workbench, face up, unopened. She kept glancing at it, but not touching it. It came this morning, she said quietly. What is it? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she opened the box she'd been holding. Inside were a few old photographs, bent edges, muted colors, like they'd been packed away for years. She pulled one out and handed it to me. A woman, maybe my age, a little younger, maybe. Huge smile, bright eyes, standing beside her, their shoulders touching like it was the most natural thing in the world. She was my sister, she said. The word was landed wrong in my chest. She died 8 years ago, she continued, voice steady but very far away. Car accident. Nothing dramatic. Just wrong place, wrong time. I looked at her, but she kept her eyes trained on the photograph in my hand. She was the one who kept me from disappearing into my work. She'd drag me out of the shop, remind me to eat, force me to talk to people. She had this energy, this way of making you feel like you mattered even when you didn't think you did. A breath hitched in her throat, so tiny I almost missed it. You remind me of her, she said. My stomach tightened, not in jealousy, not in confusion, but something close to fear. A fear of breaking something delicate without realizing it. I didn't know, I whispered. You weren't supposed to, she replied. I didn't want this, she gestured vaguely between us, to become about something it isn't. What do you think it is? I don't know yet, she murmured. But when you sit here, when you help without asking, when you laugh at the things she used to laugh at, it shakes something loose in me. Something I thought was done grieving. She finally reached for the envelope and tore it open. Inside was a small note in handwriting that wasn't hers. A birthday reminder card. Her sister's old tradition. Her birthday was next week. She stared at the card for a long moment, her jaw tightening, not against tears, but against memory. I thought I'd stopped waiting for her, she said. I stepped closer, not touching, just near enough to be chosen or pushed away. She didn't step back. For the first time since I'd met her, she leaned, not fully, barely a fraction, but enough that her shoulder brushed mine like it was the first real exhale she'd had in years. You don't have to stay, she whispered. I know, I said. But you are, she breathed. And that quiet realization, soft, fragile, shifting everything, hung between us like a truth neither of us was ready to name. The day of her birthday, I found myself standing outside her shop long before it opened. I didn't bring flowers. Or a gift. I didn't know what someone like her would accept from someone like me. What would feel honest instead of presumptuous. So I brought nothing but myself. When she unlocked the door, she didn't seem surprised to see me. Just relieved. In a quiet, guarded way that felt more intimate than any smile. You're early, she said. I didn't want you to walk in alone today. Her eyes softened, just a fraction. You remember too much. You pretend too much, I countered gently. A small breath escaped her. Not quite a laugh, not quite a sigh. Something in between. She walked inside, leaving the door open for me without asking if I'd follow. The shop was unusually still. No humming machines, no scattered parts. She'd cleared the counter like she was preparing for something she wasn't sure she should expect. We sat on the floor again, like that rainy night. But this time she wasn't curled into herself. She sat upright, back resting against the wall, fingers tracing the grain of the wooden floor. I don't like today, she said plainly. It's not grief. Not exactly. Just an emptiness that I try not to look at. You don't have to look at it alone. She didn't respond, but her shoulders loosened ever so slightly. Minutes passed. Not awkward. Just full. She would have liked you, she said suddenly. I swallowed. Because I remind you of her? No, she shook her head, slow, deliberate. Because she saw people clearly. And you? She stopped, collecting her words carefully. You look at me without expecting anything. That's rare. Her voice carried a kind of tired truth she couldn't hide anymore. I shifted a little closer, not touching her, but close enough that she could decide. She noticed. "You make me nervous," she admitted. I let out a breath I'd been holding. "Why?" "Because you see the parts one don't show anyone, and you're not afraid of them." She looked down at her hands. They were steady today. Warm light from the front window caught the faint scar on her wrist, the one she always unconsciously covered when thinking too hard. "I kept trying to push you to leave," she said. "I thought it was the safest choice. For both of us. And now." She lifted her eyes, and for once there was no guard, no mask, just vulnerability laid bare. "Now I'm tired of pretending I don't want you here." The admission didn't break anything. It didn't set off fireworks. It simply settled, quiet and certain, into the space between us. I inched closer until our knees brushed. She didn't move away. Her breath wavered, but her gaze stayed steady. Then, with a hesitation that felt unbelievably tender, she reached out, fingertips brushing mine, not holding, just touching, testing, trusting. The slightest contact, barely a moment, but something inside both of us shifted. Not dramatic, not cinematic, real. She exhaled softly, her forehead leaning toward mine until we were almost touching, close enough to feel her warmth, close enough to hear the unspoken yes in her silence. "This," she whispered, eyes half lowered. "Whatever it becomes, let it be slow. Let it be honest. I wouldn't want it any other way." Her fingers threaded gently between mine, uncertain, but choosing. And in that quiet, fragile closeness, something settled with finality, not a declaration, not a promise, just the unmistakable beginning of something neither of us could ignore anymore. Looking back on it now, it almost feels like those moments belong to another lifetime, not because they're distant, but because they changed the shape of the one I'm living in. I can trace so many things about who I am today back to that stretch of time. The way I speak more gently, the way I listen more carefully, the way I let myself hope without bracing for impact. She didn't enter my life like a dramatic plot twist. She arrived quietly, almost softly, in the middle of an ordinary season. And I think that's why her impact stayed, because it didn't depend on grand gestures or perfect timing. It came from presence, from showing up, from meeting me where I was, from offering a kind of sincerity I didn't realize I'd been starving for. I didn't notice the change immediately. Change rarely announces itself. It settles in your posture, your habits, your breathing. It shows up the first time you choose patience over fear, or when you catch yourself smiling at a memory instead of running from it. And she brought a lot of those moments into my life. What surprised me most wasn't how strongly I felt for her, but how naturally I grew because of it. She taught me, without ever intending to, that love isn't measured by intensity, by chaos, or by the adrenaline of almost losing someone. It's measured by steadiness, by how safe you feel telling the truth, by how much of yourself you're willing to let be seen. And for the first time, I allowed myself to be seen without editing the parts one thought were too much or not enough. She listened with the kind of attention that makes you realize you've been whispering your whole life. She asked questions that weren't designed to fix me, but to understand me. And in the space she created, I learned to stop treating vulnerability like a battlefield. But the biggest shift happened inside me, quietly. I learned that love, the real kind, the sustaining kind, doesn't ask you to chase it. It meets you halfway. It stands with you in the dark without demanding you pretend it's light. It grows with you, not around you. And she changed too, in her own ways. I watched her soften, not out of fragility, but because she no longer had to hold her guard like armor. She allowed herself to trust again, to laugh with her whole body, to believe that someone could choose her without conditions. I didn't fix her. She didn't fix me. We simply made room for each other to breathe. Maybe that's what love really is. Two people choosing to build a space where both can exist without shrinking. Even now, recalling those moments feels like remembering the warm light after a long storm. Not blinding, not overwhelming, just enough to remind you that you made it through. Enough to make you grateful. And if this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?